Hi, everybody. I'm Wendy Murdoch, and this is Webinars with Wendy. We're rolling along here in 2021, and we're now into April, which actually the middle of the month, it's the 15th. We have more guests lined up. It looks like we'll probably be doing about 3 webinars a week because as we move into the springtime, everybody's getting busier. And we've got a couple of things cooking in my life that might make it a little more difficult for me to do as many webinars. But don't worry, we plan to continue. We're lining up more guests. If you have any suggestions, just pop us an email at info@murdochmethod.com with a link to your suggestion if you have one, and we'll check it out and see if we can't wrangle some more guests. Today, my guest is Robyn Hood. She's one of my favorite people, and I haven't talked to her in a while, so I begged her to come back. And it's like, this is how we stay in touch, right?
Totally, totally.
And so since it's springtime, some people may be having foals, some people may be dealing with yearlings and 2-year-olds or thinking about getting their young horses started. So I thought it'd be a great time for Robyn as a TTouch trainer to talk to us about how using TTouch, they prepare their horses to be handled, haltered, started, just it's kind of a general young horse perspective. So thank you for joining me today, Robyn. It's always great to see you.
Yeah, it's fun to see you again, Wendy. Thanks to COVID, right?
Right, I know. It's like, so somebody says their foal is now 28 years old.
Yeah, I saw that. So, oh, wow, that's great.
Yep. So Robyn, just to give people a little bit of your background, I mean, it's you have worked with foals forever. I mean, because you were handling young horses way back when you were at the Pacific Coast.
Yeah. So at the research farm and when Linda had the school there, actually in Los Altos Hills, Linda had quite a few. We actually took the young horses, the Hungarian horses from Countess Bessigny. We had most of the stallions there to work with, and then we started all the young horses would come to be started in California from Montana. And the thing is, it's interesting. Linda she started a program in the 60s, and they actually had a column in Western Horseman called Let's Ride. And when it was about endurance riding and actually working with young horses and so on, and they wrote a column to say that it was not necessary to have a horse buck when you started them, and Western Horseman canceled the column. Isn't that shocking?
That is so shocking.
I know. And then I guess in the 70s, Linda she used to teach 2-day starting young horse courses for amateurs at Cal Poly. And it didn't involve any kind of round pen. It just involved basic handling, a little lunging, ground driving, quietly getting horses so that anybody could do this with their own horse to at least get the preparation for starting. Because I think too often, people send their horses to a trainer. They want these instant results in, 30 days, which is nothing. And
in the life of a 28-year-old, it's absolutely nothing, right?
It's nothing.
Except
and
if it goes south.
Exactly. And then it's because even from the time of foaling, and for the last 45 years, I've had Icelandic horses. And one year we actually had 28 foals. So I've had a little experience.
Popping out one a day, right?
Foals. Yeah. So we had 200 horses here at one point. So it was, and some of them are easier than others. That's just how they come out, and sometimes it has to do with their mother. And, they're doing some interesting studies about cellular memory. They're certainly doing them on people. And I totally believe that with, 4-legged animals, there's a huge amount of cellular memory that is carried forward in terms of their experiences. And so it's really interesting when you work with horses that the mother and father, and sometimes the father comes through really clearly, and sometimes the mother. It's genetics are kind of an interesting thing. So Linda had, she was just interested in, we did lots of different ways of starting young horses, but primarily it's about being safe. It's about being kind and being effective. And I think and it's about, if one thing doesn't work, instead of just doing more of the same thing, try to figure out something else, change your approach. And that's really been the whole Tellington method is, really based on chunking things into small pieces and helping animals to be successful and people be successful as well.
Yeah. And, I mean, I learned to start horses with you and Linda. And I started several, and, it was, if anything, you might say it's boring because there is no excitement. And, so many people think they're not capable of starting a horse, but when they send it to a trainer that does a bad job,
yeah,
it would have been better off staying home. So there's that piece. There's the sort of people that don't have the information or feel insecure about it. But, when I watch some of these clinics where they're starting horses, they do all this stuff on the ground and then they just chuck the saddle on and turn the horse loose. And I'm like, wait a second, you missed 10 letters in there, and that horse will never be able to spell stand quietly, and never buck under saddle. If you miss those letters, it's like trying to spell without the alphabet.
Totally.
I've always found it fascinating, that mindset that that's okay. And what I found with team, and I'll just say this and then I'll let you kind of explain to people what you do, is it's like creating an alphabet for the horse. And you give them each of the letters, and then you start with single syllable words, walk, trot, and then walk and trot, or circle. That's two,
Yeah.
And so it's like see, spot, run, but it's teaching a language, and it's making sure that all the pieces of the language are present, all the letters are present, so you can build simple sentences, then more complicated sentences, then really flourishy paragraphs, but it's because they have all the letters available to them.
Yeah, that's a great way. That's actually a great way to describe it. Yeah, that's really, really helpful. And, you met a horse that I have here that I was given because he was started in a way that she started all her other horses, which, worked for all these other horses. She put a saddle on and kind of noticed that he was a bit quiet when she did that. There's too quiet, that freeze when horses go into it, because explode comes after that. And she, starts her horse in a round pen, and she put her horse in, and then the stirrups dropped and the horse ran for 30 minutes. And he was one of probably I would say the most tense horse that I've ever actually worked with, and from tense to absolutely explosive. And so we made lots of progress with him. He's still in the pasture. We've done, we can catch him, trim him, do things with him. I haven't really had much COVID. I've been working on online courses rather than working with horses. So I decided that this year is going to be his year to see if I'm going to videotape it. I bought a Pivo, and I want to just videotape all the work that I do with him, and just to see he's come a long way. He's a sweet horse, but man, that first start, and I'm not saying that he was easy to start with. That's the thing. A lot of signs were missed.
Yeah.
Because, other horses that she started the same way had no problem. So there is that to it. You have to kind of consider that.
And what you have to realize is, with who knows what that horse's parents were like, what his birth was like, what his environment was like before he got started. However, by missing those signs and then having such a trauma, that will never leave his brain. You might be able to make it, like I always think of the kitchen tool that you get and you want it higher on the shelf till you move it to the other room in the pantry and you don't use it, but it's still there. Right. And it can be triggered in certain, and certainly I know a little bit about him, that I know what a trigger would be.
Yeah.
And so, you can't 100% trust that will never happen again, because it is there. And when it's like the horse that learns to buck because they didn't take the steps, that's what I see, is that people actually are teaching their horses to buck instead of the horse never considering it, because they had all the letters. The process of being tacked up was done in such a way that it was understood, it was comfortable, it wasn't frightening, it wasn't painful, and they weren't abandoned.
Yeah.
I think that abandonment is a huge piece of it. It's here you go.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and there's I have a little piece of video to show, and there's a couple of horses on here that are from a ranch in Montana, the Bitterroot Ranch, where we went for I think for 28 years, we went there and did starting young horse clinics. The last few years, it just didn't work out to be able to do it. But my daughter Mandy was there for 2 years, I think. And so all the horses got started in the starting young horse week, and then she would carry on with them kind of slowly. They're all 4-year-olds. Occasionally we started working with a 3-year-old, but they're not backed until they're 4. And the reason that we started going there is when Mel started to breed, she wanted to breed Arabs. She loved Arabs, and she, bred some horses. She had her first horse ready to be started, took it to a local trainer, and did what the person, normally did. And she was there watching the saddling. This horse got the saddle on and flipped over backwards and broke its neck.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So it's like, there are accidents can happen, but to me, that's, it, and the person did the best that they knew based on their experience and so on. But that was so, terrible experience. And so she wanted to find something else. And so her husband went online, and probably not online, went through articles at that time, because it was a long time ago, and found Linda. And so we started doing our courses there. First, we started them as advanced trainings for our practitioners. And then we just opened them up. And, there were horses that were started in that way that were being used, 13, 14, 15 years later, still in the program. And to get Arabs to be able to be in a program, they're very careful how people ride them and the level of, competency and so on. But still, it's not an easy job having different riders all the time.
No.
So,
but you bring up a good question. And I know we're kind of like, going a little ahead of the timeline, if you will. But, so many people want to start their horses at 2 and 3. And I just recall Sunig's book that he said he didn't start his horses until they shed their coat in their 6-year-old year. And that doesn't mean that you have ignored them and left them in the field till they're 6. It just means that the idea of carrying weight, and the more we learn about the horse's skeleton and how when the plates close and everything else, the pelvis doesn't fully close until they're 6. So if we're loading a lot of weight, think of a smaller quarter horse with a larger guy on a Western saddle. That's a lot of weight on their back that could set them up for difficulty later on, because your body is malleable at those younger ages and could potentially be damaged in a way that's not going to actually get better because it happened during growth. Yet people seem to be in such a hurry to get their horses under saddle early. I know my horse Al, who's a Clyde thoroughbred cross. I mean, he was started when I got him. He was supposed to be 5.5. He turned out to be 3.5. And he spent his first 6 months eating with his head in a round bale. I didn't see his head. But I would ride him lightly on the trail, but he couldn't do a 20-meter circle in a standard small dressage arena, right?
Yeah.
He couldn't.
Yeah.
So, I trailered him, I took him places, I took him on hacks. But really we didn't start his training until he was 6, because he just couldn't do it. He wasn't mature mentally or physically.
Yeah. It's a problem. How many years ago did Deb Bennett write the article about looking at when all the plates close, the pelvis at 6, the pole at 5.5 or 6, something like that, the same thing? That was years ago. And it takes people so long. And what I think is, and what I say to people, if they have a young horse is, yes, you can ground drive them. That's what we used to do with the young thoroughbreds that we had in California. And also the Hungarians is they would, they could ground drive from a halter only, not a bit, because that is, that's much more advanced work with the weight of the reins and so on. And they knew all sorts of things. They just weren't ridden. And what I say to people, I think it's the economy, the economics of it, of raising a horse to a certain age. And so if I say to people, how long do you want to have this horse? Is this a lifetime horse for you, or is this a turnover horse? And if it's a horse that you want to have for a long time, when you leave that time on the front end, you get way more time on the back end in terms of the horse's lives. And we have horses that we have many horses in their 20s that we that we are using, and they're going strong. And in Iceland, it's unfortunately they've started them earlier because of the evaluations. You start them at 3 basically, which I think is too early. But years ago, I remember at the World Championships, there was a horse that was 21, and he won the pace race and set a record for pace. And he didn't start to pace till he was 17. So, which is amazing. And then there was another horse that also was 20, and also at 20 and in the high teens. I mean, there aren't that many horses that are at a world-class level that are competing for so many years. And I think it was because they waited, they didn't, at that point, they didn't start them really till they were at least 4. And our horses are 4 when they're started, but they're often just ridden really lightly. And sometimes I've had actually horses that I started at 15, because when we started them, this is the year that we had the 20 foals, we had several very, very difficult young horses. So we started them, and like they would freeze, and they were not very easy temperament wise. So we did a little bit, and then we said, look, we have a lot of other horses in the pasture. We want to make safe horses. So we worked on those horses. 15, the horse is 15, Mandy goes, I think we ought to start him again. It was no problem. I swear, the horse was just like, he just kind of remembered everything that he'd been taught before. He became a complete easy, like a beginner's horse. So easy. It was.
This brings up such a good point, because I think so many people are afraid to leave their horses because they're going to be more difficult when they're older.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's and then other people have I want to grow up with the horse syndrome, like a dog. But you have to realize that a dog, Susanna Clothier said this to me, is the amount of development a dog goes through from birth to the first year is absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And they don't live. They live to 15 is a very old dog.
Yeah.
So their aging process is so much more rapid. But with horses, if we want our horse to be rideable into their 20s, and that's my goal, because Al's already 18 or 19, I kind of lost track.
Yeah.
We have to think about that. We have to change the mindset that just because it's young doesn't mean it has to do all of these things to be ridden. If it's done badly, in pain, and frightened, or doesn't understand, because we're setting patterns into that brain that are frightening, that are painful. And so that's what the horse is going to carry through in their life, is this is unpleasant, this is painful, this is difficult, I don't understand, versus giving them a little bit of information, giving them some time to process, coming back later, seeing how it percolates, not worrying about how old they are, because they didn't used to worry about, but also doing things with them. And this is the other piece that I'd love you to talk about, is how much is a reasonable amount to work with a foal or a yearling or a 2-year-old in terms of the time in a day, and then over like a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is pretty individual, but what I say to people is less is more, for sure, in terms of it. We don't realize the brain has the ability to take on maybe 2 or 3 new things at a time, if we're lucky. And as soon as you go past that, it just like is on overload. And I feel like, the comment that you made, first of all, about if they get too big, they're too difficult. And I've heard lots of trainers say that. And what I would say is find another method. If you have to only have, like horses small so that you can physically, out sort of muscle them, although you still can't, but you know what I mean? That because
Right.
they're balanced and so on and so forth, then I think you should question your method. Because I certainly, as a child, I started as a 6-year-old. I started lots of ponies, because we just get on and we kind of ride around, and it's not a big deal, and you build a relationship with them. And I think that's, I know, many young people that have started horses, and they go on to be fabulous horses that will do everything for them. So I think that it's individual in terms of the length of time that we work with them. And what I feel like is, if you're not doing the same thing over and over again, because I think repetition gets to a point where if they're not getting it and they don't have the time to process, they look to find different things to do because they're not sure what you want. If you don't, it's if you don't give them that sort of ABC. And you can see in you'll see in some of a couple of the videos sort of the approach that we took with this a 3-week-old that had never been handled. A few years ago, I was in Australia and I went to a really nice warm bed place where they halter all their horses quietly when they're young, but they were 6 to 8 weeks old, and we rehaltered all of them, and using just the techniques we use where you don't put them in a corner, you don't
Pressure.
it's a step-by-step thing so that they actually really get that. And it was quite interesting to see the variation of the personalities of the horses and how they sort of the expectation of the haltering. But it can be done and redone at any age. And I also will use this technique with horses that are actually quite difficult to catch and halter, is just go backwards and go back these steps. And I've ended up doing that with, a number of young horses that have come to courses with halters on because they couldn't take the halter off or they couldn't catch them. And I remember one horse that somebody thought, oh, well, Robyn will be able to rehalter it. Let's just take the halter off. And, it's not like magic. And then the horse got out of his pen. He was in a 12 by 12 foot pipe corral, got out into this big pasture without a halter on. Oh, it was interesting. So anyway, we had to figure out what to do. So we just quietly kind of herded him back into the pen, just with a bit of food, and then just quietly walking him. And then I went through the process. I would have rather had the halter on so I could go backwards and then go forwards, if you know what I mean. But it is what it is.
It's what it is. Sometimes they think that they're doing you a favor, right?
Yeah. So sure.
So there is somebody who has an 8-month-old foal and they've never handled a foal before in Virginia. So we do have someone on that is very inexperienced.
Okay. So I'll share the screen and I'll go through this PowerPoint, and I will, I'm assuming that this horse has been, obviously is led and handled and so on. My question would be, does the horse live with other horses, or, because I think how horses are raised is also super important.
Yeah, and she didn't say. So Sharon, if you want to tell us if your foal is with other foals, that would be helpful. Socialization within their own species is so important.
It is so important.
There's rules that, mares can lay down that we could never lay down in a way that the horses understand, because they're a horse and we're a person.
Exactly. And I never want a horse to think I'm another horse.
Right.
And of course they don't, or he's a person. And that's the thing with, if you have to have bottle raised foals, some of the most dangerous foals I've had to work with were bottle raised foals.
Yes.
We've had a few that we had to bottle raise, but we were able to keep them with another mare and foal. So when we had to supplement food for them, they still had the interaction, and that did make a difference. They never ended up dangerous, but I've seen some other horses that I was really, really dangerous to handle. Yep. So I had originally done this with puppies in mind for a summit in Russia. So we just talk about this, like the method that we use can be used on mares and foals. It can be used great through pregnancy, right through birth, and throughout the lifespan. So with pregnant mares, and this is also a time people may have mares in foal, belly lifts with either a towel or even a wide elastic bandage can take so much pressure off the spine. And with human mothers that are pregnant, I've gone from behind and actually done belly lifts with a wrap underneath the belly. It brought so much relief off the back. I mean, incredible relief off the pressure because everything's being pulled forward. The ear TTouch can be helpful during foaling. After foaling, I've found that for letting the milk down, and with mares that are not letting go of the afterbirth, and you're just either waiting for the vet, or you're on that cusp and the vet saying, just, let's wait X amount of time before I come, I found that can be helpful in helping to release the afterbirth. And the same with touches around the tail can also help with the back during pregnancy. The other thing that the belly lifts are good for is as you go back toward the flank, if you have a maiden mare, they can be super sensitive in the flank area. So when the foal goes to nurse, they may either reject the foal or be really uncomfortable and the milk doesn't let down. And so doing lifts around, just really paying attention to the mare, but doing lifts around the flank area and just that slow release can help so much when with the foals, particularly either with mares that have trouble with that or with maiden mares. So
just
sorry, go ahead.
Go back to working with pregnant mares. We've had a few people now that have contacted me and they've put their pregnant mare on surefoot pads and the mares love it.
It'd be fantastic. And of course, this is, we didn't have the surefoot pads at the time when we had a lot of foals, but would be fantastic to help them let go. Well, because with people, we know that if you have any sort of back pain or stress, standing on the different, various densities can make such a big difference.
And what I'm curious about, I can't remember now who messaged me, but I'm curious what the foal will be like if the mother has been standing on surefoot pads because of all the hormones that are going to be flowing to that foal, right?
Yeah, good,
so
yeah.
If you do have any pregnant mares again, see what happens.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think Beth has been using them on her foals too,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, working with foals, it's important that the handling is mindful. And, for a lot of years, the imprinting kind of became a thing that people did. And I personally am not a fan of flooding because that's kind of what it is. And I always want the mother to, the foal to bond with the mother first. I think first and foremost.
Can you define the word flooding?
Flooding is repetitive, doing something until there's absolutely no response.
So in other words,
so for instance, if you want to get them to desensitization through just this repetitive, just doing the same thing over and over again, whether it's patting your horse, whether it's patting their feet, whether it's tapping, whatever it happens to be, and I've worked with a number of foals that were imprinted, and I have to say they were not easy. They weren't what's the word? They were not, it wasn't that they were horrible, but they were so evasive about everything because they had found ways to kind of avoid things. And I think handling is one thing. And most people will say to me, who tell me, oh, I've imprinted my foal. I asked them what they actually did. They did not imprint. They just handled the foal mindfully. They just handled the foal quietly, and is a huge difference in my experience in terms of doing that. Yeah. And I believe that the first experiences can become their default response.
Absolutely. Which leads me to so many people want to talk about desensitizing their horse.
Yeah.
And in my perspective, my 16 two-hand, 1,500 pound Clyde Thoroughbred cross, I can go, and he's like, oh, yes, ma'am, because he's sensitive and he's responsive. Whereas the 14 two-hand Welsh cob that I think may have been imprinted doesn't get it. It's like you have to be so loud. So I don't understand the concept of desensitizing because I want my horse to be sensitive to the aids, to my body language, to my position.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's such a confusing term to talk about desensitizing.
I agree 100%. And what I say to people, because they'll say, oh, you're desensitizing. And what I like to say is, I want to familiarize an animal to something so that they accept it and they're comfortable with it, not that they put up with it, not that they shut down to put up and then sort of explode. So and I feel that that's quite a different approach to things than thinking about doing something over and over and over until you get no response. Because who wants that insensitive kind of horse? And I think then one of the challenges that I personally have seen is that if you have a horse that has been has been imprinted, has been what I call overhandled too, is that when they go to a trainer, if they go to a trainer who uses methods that actually are more based on kind of instinctive responses, like if they, and I watched this horse at one of the expos, very handled young horse, very connected to their people, be put into a round pen, and the horse, they were trying to chase it around. The horse didn't know what to do. So the horse kept coming over to them. So they kept escalating it. The mare, she actually started to go into a very primitive response of showing heat.
Wow.
And I think she just didn't know what to do because it wasn't in her wheelhouse of being handled in that way. You know, so I was just, it was interesting. So
if I could summarize this a little bit, there's no handling, meaning the horse is left to its own devices, hopefully in a herd, learns horse behavior. There's overhandling where, and in the case of imprinting, as I understand it, handling that foal from the moment it's born all over the place, but then it's not connecting to its mother. And I actually had the experience, I inadvertently did that with a horse once. I will never forget it. And I will, you know, it will always remind me of the danger of even kind touching, but interfering with the mare's bonding with the foal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's sort of the middle, which is some contact with the foal, but allowing it to be a horse and teaching it the skills that it's going to need in life in a measured way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and so the desensitizing, when I hear people use that word, and flooding is the word that's actually coming in now, where the nervous system has been overloaded. The horse can't learn. But, you know, when we think about teaching people, we don't flood them with information. Some people do, but then those people freeze, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, there's no question about that. And, you know, to be honest, if I had my choice, I'd actually rather work with an underhandled young horse than an overhandled one.
Yes.
Just because you have to sometimes end up being, and we've had we sold a few mares in foal, and people had the foals, and listen, foals are so cute. And the foals started to get, you know, quite pushy. And so then you have to be hard on them. And it seems so unfair that you kind of change the rules as the game goes on. And so I'll often say to people, look, you don't want to do anything with a young horse or let them do something that wouldn't be okay when they're older. And you see it sometimes with minis, you know, people picking them up and having them be in their lap and all those sorts of things. Well, I think you just have to be careful with that sort of situation. And if the horse ends up being really difficult, just don't blame the horse. You know, that's what I would say anyway.
Well, the thing is, in the end, we're supposed to be the ones doing the training. And if it's a difficult horse, we have to find other means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a little difficult. I saw that in the chat, the person with the foal, she's the only foal. And you know what? Sometimes that's what circumstances happen. That's there, you know, there's things that we can't control. The one thing I find a little challenging sometimes in terms of, keep talking about the herd and the group dynamics, is if you have an only foal and they don't have, like, sometimes they have other horses, but the other horses either really bully them or they never set any boundaries for them. And if they totally bully them, what I have seen happen is that those foals often grow up being bullies because they never had an opportunity of having kind of an equal, you know, like that give and take relationship rather than a pyramid. And so that's the advantage. Like if the person with the foal could for at some point find a safe situation that her horse could be with a young horse about the same age and, you know, the same sort of style. Mares and colts play quite differently. So that there's a you know, you can see in the pasture which are mares and which are fillies and which are colts when you have a group of them. And so that can be so beneficial in terms of them just in their, in sort of in raising. It's not always possible, but if it is, it's a great thing to do. So I'm just gonna, maybe this will go down now.
Yeah, she says the foal crowds and she wants her to be better behaved in the barn.
Yeah. So part of the crowding, in my experience, is that physical, emotional, and mental imbalance. So as they grow, we don't mean to, but we accidentally sometimes put them out of balance in our handling, and then they crowd us, and so we're kind of annoyed with it, and so on. And the word respect comes up so often in the horse world, and the root definition of the word respect is to look again. And that is not what most people actually think about respect. So it's re-looking at the situation rather than, making a judgment about what it is. So I'm going to just show this. I'll just put this through. It's a video we did. We put it together, photographs. And this was at the Bitterroot Ranch.
Can you just move your pointer because the little hand.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Thanks, that's okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So this was a 3-week-old Arab filly, completely unhandled. And their horses aren't afraid, but you can see she's high-headed, she's tight in the neck, tight in the tail. And so we took her into an enclosed space, not like a rectangle. And I started using the wands with her. And I was able to use the mother as I could reach across, and I start in the air first, and then I kind of work around, and you do a bit and then you stop, and you do a bit and you stop. So it's not continually. And what I'm looking for is the engagement. I let her nurse. I do a little, then as I can comfortably get closer to her, I do some touches with the wand. I do tons of pauses with this filly, just stepping back away from her and letting her kind of move around to see, is she starting to be interested in me? And that engagement is so important. She can constantly move. I'm never going to chase her. And I'm always going to make sure that she has an exit route. And so I'm looking to find something that she finds enjoyable, but without triggering that, she's going to scratch me response, because that's not really helpful. So then I put a body rope on, and I put a body rope on a horse before I put a halter on them, because I want them to have a better sense of the work front to back. And so I start on the neck, I drop it around the neck, and then I actually step away so that if she needs to move and needs to come off, she can take it off. I don't really care. So then I start, it's kind of like having a butt rope, but if you have it on the front and back, you can kind of contain the whole body. They can turn and halt and end up being in balance rather than being like a fish on the end of a line. And we actually trim all our foals with just a body rope on, if they've never been handled. Now we handle them a little bit more, we did. So then we use another catch rope to make the to go around the neck for the halter, but I actually just use it around the neck to move her without it being on her head. And it doesn't tighten, it's clipped to a ring, so it's not going to tighten around the neck anywhere. And you can see that she's lowered her head. And then we move the mare a little bit, so she actually starts to learn to be able to move. And this was quite a sensitive mare. I worked with her as a yearling as well. So I start with the back of the hand. It's much less threatening than the palm. I do a little bit and take my hand away, step away, let her sort of process the experience. And I look to find out where she's most comfortable being touched to start with. And I'm not pushing her head down to lower her head. I want her to be able to lower it because she's comfortable with it. And then again, she starts to engage, and I'm using the back of my fingers to do that. Now, I want to be able to touch them all over the face before I put a halter on them, rather than, I want them to put their nose into the halter, not me have to find their nose with the halter. And that little hand on the opposite side of the cheek is just to say, could you come with me? And again, no downward pressure at all. It's just doing some touches along her neck.
About how long was the whole session, Robyn?
20 minutes, but with lots of, lots of
breaks.
pauses. Yeah, lots of just stepping back and letting her just kind of have a nurse, move around, and let her check me out. It's only fair. I'm doing a lot to her, can she check me out? I did a little bit, a touch around her mouth, and then I did a little, just asked her to come forward. But you see, the posture is so different than it was when we started. And then I wanted to be able to, touch her around the ears and her poll. A lot of foals are super, super tense around that area, especially when they have that high-headed posture that is kind of inherent. Can I do a little bit of touch on her ears? And I'm not holding her to me, it's just like a little connection with the line.
And somebody's noticing that her mother looks very relaxed with the whole idea.
Yeah. And that's, super important as well.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do just, the mouth they protect their mouth a lot. That's how they get food. So I just wanted to be able to do a little bit of touch around the mouth. She's really cute.
I know, she's like,
Yeah. And she was willing to just kind of rest her chin in my hand. And the mouth work, of course, is great for horses that are difficult to deworm. So a lot of it is finding out where are the areas that they're comfortable and where are the areas that they're not comfortable. And don't work more on the areas that they're not comfortable. Go somewhere else and come back to it. And I kind of do a little scratch, just a little scratch up just below the knee at the back. And I really like them to just be able to pick up a foot and put it down and pick up a foot and put it down. I don't hold it. I just want to say, can you just shift your weight onto 3 legs? Just even for a moment. And what we found with foals is that some have a much easier time starting on the hind feet than they do on the front feet. So with my farrier, we would just tell him which one it was that was easiest for the horse, and he would start there. She doesn't look too stressed by the whole thing. No. So then I'm going to put a halter on, but rather than put a halter, I'm going to use the catch rope to make a huge loop that I can quietly put over her nose and take it off. Because she's like, that feels weird. Of course it feels, it feels very weird. But I actually want horses to know that when we start something, they don't have to do something to make us stop. Mm-hmm. That we're actually going to stop, and then it's the same with getting on horses. We get on and we get off. We want them to know that it's, everything we do will end.
Well, and that's just, I always tell people horses can't tell time. They don't know when you start something that it's going to, you might know that you're going to stop, but they're in the present. They don't know unless you stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm leading her with the body rope. There's no pressure on the halter. And that's really important because horses can so quickly react. And I've seen people get horses going over backwards so easy. So this is when I put the halter on. You see that her head is quiet, and I want her that she's not throwing her head up when I put the halter, that she actually kind of drops her nose into the halter. And it's huge and a lot of weight, because that's the other thing. As soon as we put something on their head, we change their balance.
Yep.
And that's what people don't recognize. And I always use a line on the side of the halter with young horses or horses that don't lead easily or forward rather than underneath. So it doesn't force the head up. It helps to encourage the head to be
And you're using a
quiet.
flat webbed halter.
Yes, absolutely. That's the only thing I would use. And so then I took everything off and I ended, and she was still willing to it really engage with me. And that's the whole thing is, of course, everything is stressful, but look at the difference in her
Wow.
posture from when she came in to when she came out. So, you know, and so there now she's walking back to the pasture with her mother, but not really so concerned with things. So it was really it was a really nice experience actually to work with her. And it is so much fun. I've done this with so many foals that it's a great experience to do, to do this with. I actually was once in Texas at a big demo years and years ago, and these people bring me a 6-month-old quarter horse that foal with its mother that had never been handled. So it's at this huge arena, and they had to they were late because it took hours to get this foal in the trailer. Like with our foals, they go in the trailer with their mother from, depending on their age, from a month old to like a few months old, and they're moved from pasture to pasture. So going in the trailer is always a positive experience. They're not leaving home for the first time, you know, like after being there for 4 years or whatever. So it's not a big deal. They go in, they go out, they go to nice places. It's a nice situation. So they bring this foal, and the only place they had me to work was a 24 by 12 foot pen, which is too big when you have a horse that's totally not handled, because what are they going to do? They're going to start going fast, and I don't want that. So I'm like thinking to myself, not sure how this is going to go, but I did a little bit before lunch, maybe 20 minutes, and this foal was pretty wild. Of course, he's been put in a trailer, gone to a new place. It's noisy. It's a big coliseum and so on. And I left him, and then I came back, and like some kind of miracle happened in between the morning and the afternoon. And, I was able to quietly halter him. And it was the break. It was the not doing too much in the morning. That's for me. It's so hard for people to stop.
Right.
It's so hard if it's, and especially in front of a big group, because, you feel embarrassed, you feel a certain amount of pressure to do it and so on. And I just kind of said to myself, well, and I said to everyone, I said, I don't know how this is going to go. I really don't. So I'm going to do a little bit, and then we're going to carry on and see what happens. So not easy to do though. And I totally understand why people like end up pressuring things, because they feel like they need to make a performance. And it's, in my opinion, one of the reasons that these, whatever they're called, the starting horse clinics or the ones that they do at these expos are horrible for horses. These 5 30-minute sessions, and they're supposed to have the horses going under saddle, walk, trot, canter, doing all these things. I just think it's not a good thing for horses. So this one is a little video of a filly. I think she's a New Forest filly. And when she was small, somebody very helpful said, here, I'll get a halter on. So they put a halter on her. And then she was very nervous to start with. And then they couldn't get it off. And so she came, and we had a stall. She didn't have any stall to work in where she was, and so on. So we put the mare and foal in the stall. This is the second session because, and it's not great photography because it's through bars and so on. The first thing I did after I did the wands, like I did with the foal, is I took the halter off her. In that case, I just wanted to get the halter off her because it was really tight on her and obviously not very comfortable. So this is the second day. And I'm using the back of my hand to do touch on her face. And by this time, I've got a little body rope on her. And that's how I started the day before. And I'm just using my other hand to just kind of contain her head. It's not holding it, but just sort of say, could you stay with me? And so that one ear was super, super, super sensitive to her. You can see that really, really tight. So I kind of disengage, and she can certainly move if she needs to. She's not tight. This was a little difficult now. This is tough. So if I go from the back of my hand to the front, that's when she's changed to the response.
So Robyn, do you think the back of the hand is more akin to the mare's muzzle?
I'm not sure. If you even touch a person on their back with the back of your hand, they can feel that it's different than the palm. Like there's less heat, there's less feeling that you could be grabbed.
Right.
And that's a huge thing, is not obviously being able to grab them. Now I worked this filly I think 6 sessions altogether, pretty short sessions. And this is I'm not sure what this is. I'm just not sure exactly when this was. I think I'd put the halter on her with the rope halter. And I think a couple of times I'd done it. So now I think I'm to the point. I think you're going to get to see her in just a second. So what I've done is I've got just a line around her neck at this point. So I can just see on a little ask and release, and it's on the release that they move, not on the pressure. Can I get here? Now, if the mother would move, I think she does move. You'll see how I actually, put the halter on her. The first day you couldn't touch her anywhere on her face. So you see, I just kind of put it on and then I take it off. I just want her to know I want to be able to do it slowly. I want to do it just quietly so she doesn't feel stressed. Now she just took a big mouthful of hay, and that's okay. I want her to be able to have that now. So she's super sensitive across the top of the pole. So I bring it around rather than throwing it around or flipping it around. And then I just do it up really quietly.
And you could see from that little burst forward that there still was some anxiety there.
Totally. But and I think she was 6 or 7 months old still with her mother, but that was just fine. Because it would have been a nightmare to take her away in this case. So I'm just using this, the catch rope around her neck to actually move her rather than from the halter. Her mother's really helpful with this.
Yes, I've noticed.
Yes. And then I put it on, but you see, she gets quieter and quieter with having the halter go on. And I didn't leave it on when she went out. And then I'm going to ask her to move. So I got a little ask and release. And of course, it's important that that's not going to tighten around her neck. It's just there's a ring in it, so it just moves it.
So it's only a loop, really.
Yeah, it's just a loop. And then I just take it off really quietly. And I want her to just be able to stand quiet. But her neck was just like crackly when you could just feel like it just that high-headed, tense posture that she had. The challenge with this halter is it had no rings on the side. So we had to we sort of jerry-rigged something that we could use. So I think this is the 3rd day, and I wanted to get to being able to pick up her feet because she hadn't had her feet trimmed. And so I don't put anything on her head, but I'm connected to her with the line around her neck. And I found a place that she was comfortable with a little bit of scratching. So I did a little scratching, and then I picked up her hind feet. Her hind feet were easier to do it, but not having anything on their head is much easier for a horse to pick up their feet, especially because you don't have something imbalancing them, a horse that's unbalanced.
Which are a lot of horses.
Which are lots of horses, yeah. She's having a good scratch on her mother. I'm giving her a little scratch on her chest. See, I wanted to find places that are really a pleasant reward for her to make it worthwhile to do something with me. Why should she care about me, right? I mean, who am I to her?
Well, but you've been so clear about your boundary that you're doing something nice for her, but it's not something that needs to be reciprocated.
Exactly. And you see, she's really interested in the, the halter is not something that she's shying away from. It's a shame I didn't have video the first day, but that's the way it is,
Yeah.
It's
No, I totally.
and really the amount of time that I worked with her totally over three days, 6 sessions, 3 days, might have been an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes, something like that, because we had to get them in and out of the stall. And I wanted her to have enough short experiences that she could actually start to realize that humans were not just going to put her in the corner and do something. And I don't want, as you like, she can sniff me. It's totally okay. She sniffs me, because I'm not going to say I'm not going to shoo her away, but I'm not going to let her mug me. It's like, here's the space. And that's a hard one to do sometimes with foals, because they do want to be friendly, but then they get overly friendly. And that's the little bit of the challenge that happens sometimes.
Don't stay little. That's the problem.
That's right. They don't stay little. So this is pretty funny. This is from 1985. This was one of the newsletter articles that we did. And this was showing this 3-month-old filly. And they were, I'm sure she's Welsh, and working a little bit with her mother of going over some of the elements. And you can see that on the picture on the left, because the handler's far enough forward, the filly can really lower her head and use her back and neck and so on. And on the photo on the right, the handler's a little bit back, and so it changes how she can go over poles. So our position and our handling position and what we do is everything, actually, in terms of the response for the foal.
And it's interesting because she looks like she's mirroring him in so many ways there.
Yeah, totally. And that makes a difference. And of course, the mother, I think they probably started with the mother going over it first, and then they went across the bridge, and he's got just a little like a little butt rope, not the whole catch rope, because we didn't use the figure 8 at that point, I think. But we don't want pressure on the head. That's the point, and that's the whole point of it. Now, the bridge is really great for new surfaces, like loading in a trailer. I wouldn't use food like this today. I wouldn't have probably used it then. If I'm going to use food, I'm not going to lure them with food. I'm going to put it down and let her have a little nibble as she goes along. But I wouldn't draw her forward with food personally. And with foals, I have used, with really nervous foals, I will use some food because I can get them to eat a bit. I tend to use pretty low value food, especially if they're fairly comfortable, like hay or maybe a bit of grass, something, but not something too high value, because I don't want them to get frustrated in terms of their response to things. So this was just a 2-year-old. So we, when we had a lot of foals too, we always did starting young horse clinics here. And one of the first things is to just start with a grooming session. And this filly, had been bought by a very well-meaning family as a yearling, and had been, in a group. They bring her to a barn, and the first thing they want to do is give her a bath. Well, she didn't have a clue of what having a bath was about, and she really, really panicked. And then she started to be aggressive to them in the pasture, but it was just, I think she was just afraid, because she was never a problem when she came to our place to be sold. We just paid attention to her, when she was concerned, we just paused. And then she was really, really lovely foal. So, and there's a lot of people around her here, but we're just quietly, part of the course of quietly handling her. So I had to add this one. This was also at the ranch, and this was he's 3 years old. We called him kind of a Frankenstein horse. He was a Arab, Andalusian, some kind of draft, and one other thing cross. So he at 2, so the horses at the ranch run on 1,000 acres, and it's pretty rocky, so they generally wear their feet down. And when they're 2, they come in, and they're handled kind of once a year to do basic things with them, but they're not afraid of people. Like they're really not afraid at all. So the farrier took them into the place they normally do, and I'm sure that he probably somehow, attached him to something, and he just panicked. And he's a big horse. So he was like, he couldn't be done anyway. So you'll see his feet in a minute, terrible feet. So we were at the ranch, and Linda was there with me at this course as well. And we were talking about, she said, years and years ago, we had this Hungarian stallion come to us, and he was really, really difficult. And our farrier laid him down, as people will do sometimes with horses, quietly laid him down, did his feet, and then he was okay. And I said, well, we're not going to do that. That's not something I would do. We come out the next day this is the pen they stay in during the day. They're grazing at night. This horse is lying down right in front of the fence of the gate. So I go in just to see what he does. And I start doing some touch. He's just lying down. He looks like he's dead. He's not. He's like just lying there.
Thank you for saying that.
And he was lying there, and he's not tranquilized. And so I did some touch on him. I just shortened the number of pictures. And then I thought, well, while he's lying down, what if we could take the nippers and let him have the feeling of what the nippers would feel like, right? And so Mandy was with me, and these are terrible nippers. They're so old. But so he's lying down flat. So he kind of gets up onto his chest as we're doing that. And nothing's keeping him there. But he's kind of looking around. And he's sort of interested in, what Mandy's doing. At one point, he came up like that, and then he laid flat again. So he clearly wasn't concerned about what we were doing. And so then he did stand up. And so then I had this idea, well, maybe if he didn't have to pick his feet up to start with, and we put a foot on a board, and then we could at least get the feet trimmed just to get them sort of out of there. So we did that. We got a little bit there. And then we happened to have a barefoot trimmer who was on the course, which was really handy. So we put a body rope in this case, because that we could balance him with that without having contact on his head. And that was such an important thing. If anybody had contact on his head, he was had such poor balance that it just threw him out of balance. Three. Yeah, he's 3.
Huge.
He's huge. Exactly. So can you imagine this horse like freaking out? Not a good thing. And he's really solid. So we found places that he enjoyed to be scratched. In this case, because his feet are also heavy, Mandy did it. This is how they do it in Iceland and lots of places in Europe. One person holds the foot, the other person trims. Mm-hmm. This is where your hoof jack really helps for sure. This horse would have so benefited from standing on surefoot pads. I think the surefoot pads would have changed this horse 100%, because like even the wooden board, he'd stand on that, no problem. Yeah. And I think it would have made such a difference to his balance. So, so these are his feet before. Yeah, they're not good, right? And this is the horse that runs on stones.
The drafty feet.
And that's a foot after. So that's a lot better than before. So that was all we thought. Well, if we can get those, pointy edges off, and we can get, at least change something. He had a big crack in his foot. Yeah. So it's a better looking foot than the other one. So he taught us a lot, because we had to completely think outside the box about what we were going to do with this horse. Because, it was fun. It was fun to do it. So here's the 2-year-old again, and we wanted to prepare her for trailering. She'd been in a trailer, but we wanted to change her experience. So we just chunked down the exercises for them. And one of the things that I started doing about 6 years ago, and I started this in Australia, I had 4 young Icelandics came to a course. They'd never been off the farm where they were raised, and they'd never been in an indoor space. So we were in an indoor arena. So I let them all go together in the indoor arena freely. And I let them wander around for about 20 minutes. And at first they moved like a school of fish. They were right together, as Icelandics will do. And then they started to peel off and explore the environment. So I do that at my farm when we're starting our young horses, or when we have outside horses. We let them come into the arena, and with nothing on them, maybe a halter, but we let them go freely and explore their environment. And I think that's such an important thing that we don't do with horses. We don't necessarily let them freely explore the areas that we're going to work with them. And I started doing that at Bitterroot too. And it made a huge difference because they were being taken away from the only thing they knew.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, that was really helpful. So we make all kinds of elements. We make it easy. We make it as wide as we, to make it comfortable and to make them successful. This little car wash, we can make it so there's nothing hanging down. And when we do go to walking across things, we're going to stop them. I might put something on it for them to eat, but not so that they had to stretch to get on it, and then bring them over. And then we do this, step-by-step preparation. We ground drive them. We have them go under things and over things and stand above them and lean over them, and like all the things that they would be expected to do, because it's interesting that, lots of horses were on the ground and then suddenly we're on their backs, and that having something above their eye level is really important for horses to get comfortable with. This lower right picture is at Bitterroot. And in this case, we decided to just get on this horse bareback and on and off. And some horses will do that. And some horses we start with the saddle. Kind of depends. I kind of like it. I like the idea that you can just get on and off them bareback so that they have the feeling of, the legs around them and so on. It does depend on the horse.
And
but,
the person.
And the person. Well, so, of course. And that's the thing, is you don't want to be getting on young horses if you're not comfortable. That's, you have to be experienced for the mounting process, but you can do everything else. It's like you can prepare your horse by, and if you go through all these steps with them, I think that if you do then send them off to a trainer, then I think that they're going to be so much further ahead. It's really, then that's where I've used, when my daughter was young too, I'd throw her up on the young horses and slide her off, because you can actually just get them off. But I don't do it unless I'm pretty darn sure that the horse is going to be okay. And you can tell that when you lean over them, and, when you're just kind of standing beside them, and so on. So it was really, it should be as interesting as watching paint dry. You made that comment in the beginning. It should be boring, as far as I'm concerned, to watch horses get started. And the first 10 rides are the easiest. It's like 5 to 10 rides. And sometimes the horses will start to go, hang on a minute, why are we doing this? And because, they're probably a little bit sore, like they're going to be, as you say, horses actually aren't really structurally meant to carry riders, in terms of they have to be able to hold themselves in a certain posture for it to be comfortable. Most of our young horses, because we start them inside and then we get them out on baby trail rides, and then in, sort of like longer areas and so on. And the only problem we've had with a few of them is we'll start to go out, we'll go part way, and we'll want to turn around to go back. And they don't want to turn around. They want to keep going because it's fun. And, if you start a horse, or you're working with a horse and they start to get harder to catch as opposed to easier to catch, you need to look at something. There's a reason, horses, their behavior is a form of communication. And we have to really, really look at that. So we always, say to people, chunk it down to make it so that you and the animal can be successful. Give a lot of pauses so that they can digest and integrate the information. It's only in the pause. And see, I think that actually the surefoots give pause, even though it's active, but there's a moment of just being, which is so important.
But there's also the moment very often when they step off, that's another pause. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And remember that the journey is more important than the destination. And it's the journey that you take is going to determine, in a lot of, cases, the destination of where you go and how you get there. So it's a lot of fun. And I think you need to be, really mindful. Now you had asked me about the labyrinth. I just added a few slides about the labyrinth, because this is a great tool. And actually, one of the things I didn't mention about the young horses is we set up a pattern of elements. So it might be a labyrinth. There might be what we use, this double triangle that we use. It could be a fan, whatever it happens to be, whatever the horse can do quite easily. Make a pattern through those elements, so that when you're adding anything new, it changes the context. So if you add, in our case, we might add a body wrap. That's going to change the context of how they move through something, over something, around something. When you add a person on the second side, which we often do, that's going to change the context. If you add a saddle, oh my gosh, that changes the context and changes the balance tremendously. So if they have something predictable to do, it helps. They're more, it's easily integrated, the new experience. But if you're changing so many things at once, you see, like you go into the labyrinth. Oh yeah, I know the labyrinth. It's predictable. I know that I'm going to, go around this corner, or I'm going to stop before here, or whatever it is. And that predictability, I think, is really important for horses to feel safe.
Robyn, I've been recently listening to The Power of Habits. Right? A book.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about the cue, the routine, and the reward, or the payoff. And to change a habit, you don't change the cue and you don't change the payoff, you change the routine. But this is the reverse. The labyrinth is the routine.
Yeah.
So if you change the cue, but you run a routine, the payoff is going to be the same. You've just said, okay, here's a cue now, a saddle on your back, but we're still going to do the labyrinth, the routine.
Right.
So in that context, by maintaining that consistency, you can change the initial thing, but then they go, oh, I know this.
Exactly.
I can be
exactly.
successful. I understand.
Yeah.
And that's like with perfect pads, I always tell people to do them by themselves first before you add something else with them, so that they know that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Rather than, I agree 100%. And of course, so with the labyrinth, if you're going to use the labyrinth with a rider, you need to make it huge.
Yes.
Because or change it, make it into a zigzag pattern so that there's more gentle turns, because it's really difficult for a lot of horses to make those turns when they're carrying a rider and so on. So that's something that's interesting. Now, this I thought was so interesting. So I don't know if you ever met Erica Hall, Wendy. I don't know. She was a long time long ago. She was involved with the world. So she took a cow through the labyrinth because she found it was really helpful, and she made this giant labyrinth out of, they're called plywood cores. So they're like about maybe 3-inch in diameter posts that come the center of when they make it from trees, when they're making plywood. And she cut them and she attached them like 2 or 3 together with rope so she could bend the labyrinth. Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
So I thought that was very, very cool. So and of course the one above is a real labyrinth. And one of the reasons that labyrinths are important is that they, what they say the Greeks said about labyrinths is that you go in with a question and you come out with an answer. And there is something about the meditative value of doing something mindfully, where you're really thinking about what you're doing and so on, that is important. I know we're kind of going a long time here. I want to say one thing about picking a trainer.
Oh,
and I did and this is actually the same in a way of picking a riding instructor, is go and watch them work with a horse, see how they interact, how they interact when things don't work. Because when things aren't going well, it's more important to see how someone deals with things than when things are going well. It's easy to be nice. So you want to be able to watch them. I understand that barns will have, rules and so on, but if somebody doesn't want to let you watch them work with your horse, personally, I would say no, because you are an advocate for your horse. You are the only person who will advocate for your horse. And it's your job. And I've had so many people say, well, I just didn't know. Well, that's your job. Sorry, but to make sure that,
Can I add to that if your horse is in training and they tell you what time they're going to ride, show up different times earlier. Yeah. I worked for someone, this is a very long time ago. And one day somebody wanted to come back and watch, but it turned out she was using a hose in her training. And I didn't know that she did this because it was typically not when I was around, but
Yep.
I will never get that memory out of my head of
Yep.
using a piece of garden hose.
Yeah.
And so it's just, even if it's so, and the other thing I'm going to say is, and Robyn, I'm sure we're not perfect.
No.
As we work really hard to be the best person we can be, but on any given day, sometimes we're not that best person. We would be our best person if we walked away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's also important too, to see, can they pause? Can the person pause?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why, it's like when things are going well, it's easy to be nice. But when things don't go well, that old saying, when knowledge ends, violence begins.
Yes.
And it's just because we get frustrated, and it can happen to every person. And I've had times in my life that if I could look back and if I could say, wow, if I only knew then what I know now, I would do things in a different way. Right. And I think that when people can at least say that, it means that they're on some path of, progression, if you will, or being able to recognize that. See, I think you can always make everything better. And all you have to do is look at your progression of the Surefoot pads. And I've seen people say, well, how did you come up with so many pads? Well, because different things work for different situations. And there is that, nothing works for every situation. And so having more choice means that you can be more successful.
Yep.
I think that's really, it's really important. And is it easy? No, it's not easy. It isn't, because especially, and if you do take your horse to a trainer, make sure that you have a reasonable expectation of what they can achieve. Also, I think that's important.
Well, and the flip side of that is, when they say your horse needs another 60, 90, 180 days, they're not saying that. You have to discern, are they saying that to just take your money, which some people will?
Yeah.
Or are they saying that to be the advocate for the horse?
Yep. Yeah.
And you have to parse that. There's not a straight answer. But if they're a kind person and they're going to tell you they need more time, they're trying to make a better horse for you. And if you insist that they keep it that has to be there for this 90 days, you've set that trainer up to use techniques that you don't want them to use.
Yeah, totally. And maybe depending on the distance from your home, maybe the horse needs a break. Like, I think if you sent your horse somewhere and they said, okay, I'm going to send my horse here for whatever number of days it is, and then we're going to give this horse a break for 2 or 3 weeks. Because what I've always found is that if you do give them that break, if they've learned something, they'll come back better than when they ended.
Yes.
And that's when we're doing lessons like with neckline driving or ground driving. It's what I look to, sort of my barometer is, can I start where we ended, or how far back do I have to go in the lesson to repeat it in terms of whether they really got it? Because the second and third time you do something with an animal will tell you what the first time was probably like. Lots of them, like getting in a trailer is a perfect example. They get in a trailer. Lots of them just kind of, they're kind of trusting, they get in and then they have a terrible ride. So then, or they really lose their balance and whatever. The next time and the next time they're going to be more hesitant to do it. And I see that with lots of things, with the farrier. And I am so blessed that I've had such great farriers over the last 30 years that we've been here, where they're just patient with the horses, but they know that we don't expect them to train our horses. And that was the first thing I said he was our farrier for 30 years. And I said, look if the horse is difficult, because we used to get a lot of horses from Iceland and they were not very easy with their feet. You don't have to do them today. You know what? We'll work with the horse to make sure that they are balanced, they can pick up their feet. And so he loved coming here because he could stay safe, the horses would be safe, and so on. So we have a responsibility, and we also have we have an advocate for our horses, and we have a responsibility to be fair to the person that we're working with, and vice versa.
Right. And I think it comes a lot of times, they're so individual, but if you find yourself uncomfortable, if your gut is starting to boil, you need to really start digging, asking questions, finding out what's going on.
Yeah.
Does this horse need a break? Is this horse with the wrong trainer? Is something off? It should be a pleasant and interesting and fun learning experience.
Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. And it's not always easy for, I really do get that. It's not easy being a horse trainer, because then you have to the horse might be fine for you. And that's, again, one of the problems of these trainers challenges. If you have really good timing, you're super experienced, you can get horses to do all sorts of things just because you have great timing. You can, you totally know how to read the horse, even when you don't know that you're reading that because you're so experienced. But that doesn't mean that the horse really knows it, or that someone else is going to be able to replicate that. And that's that's a challenge for the trainers as well, is, can you make a horse that someone else can ride? And that's,
that's a very big question.
Yes.
Very big.
Yeah.
I know someone, she's a trainer, but she had a stroke. So her horses have a long time, quite a while ago, and she's working with me, and her riding has gotten a whole lot better, but her horses have to be able to tolerate the fact that her two sides are really different.
Yeah.
And it makes for good horses.
Yeah.
Because she can't skip letters, and they need to be tolerant when the message isn't quite right.
For sure. For sure.
The more precise a trainer is, the harder it is for someone else to ride them well.
No, absolutely. And I can remember that when I was in California, and I got this really nice young thoroughbred, beautiful horse. And he was, if I only knew then what I know now, oh my God. And he would have, anyway, it was, and I could ride him really well, and I could ride him, and it was really good, but it wasn't easy for other people because the horse was also so used to what I did. And that is the other thing. And it's so that's where it's fun sometimes having kids. Like my kids always rode the horses, and doesn't mean an adult can ride them because a kid can, because they're, they just got to go on, but they get used to things not being perfect. And I don't want to purposely not be perfect, but it's, so Robyn asked about any books on material about starting a horse. Well, actually Linda and my daughter published a book last year with Trafalgar called Starting and Restarting Young Horses. I think I should have had a copy of the book, and it's great. It goes through step by step by step, whether it's a young horse or an older horse. Again, is, if something isn't working, do something else. The horse may not be ready for it. But when I've had horses that, and this is what Mandy used to do at Bitterroot, the horses would have a week off after we did the work with them. And then they had a big arena at a place, farther away from where we were working. She'd bring all the horses there, and they would all stand in these little pens watching her work each horse. And she didn't work them for long. And she said, the horses would just learn by watching the other horses, and she'd just do a little bit with them, put them back, do a little bit more. So they had their friends there. That's a huge advantage for them, feeling safe in a new space. And she said that little break for them too allowed that integration of the information. And that was really important.
Right.
Really important.
The bottom line is that all that we're learning about the brain, and we're learning about learning with people, applies to dogs and horses.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that the comforting thing is that as we understand more about how we learn, we can just simply take that model and put it on the horses. And if you've ever struggled with learning something new, or felt insecure about something, or, had a rough patch, you can relate to your horse. They're going through the same thing.
Yeah. And trust yourself. Like just as you were saying earlier, if you don't feel right about it, do your best not to be bullied, because you know what? Sure, we all have different opinions and different experiences, but if your gut says to you, because that's my, my 5 things that I say to people, when you're watching anybody work, is what they're saying and what they're doing the same thing. Okay. And it doesn't mean that they're trying to trick you, because sometimes they just don't know that it's this thing they're doing that's actually having the influence. The second thing is, if you were in the horse's hooves, what might you be learning? And sometimes I watch people and they're saying, and I have no idea what the animal is supposed to be learning. I really don't. The third thing is, how does it feel to you in your gut and in your heart? Because if it doesn't feel okay to you in your gut and in your heart, the fourth thing will come into play, and that is, could you do it? And that's, could you do it from an emotional state? Do you have the skills to do it? If it doesn't feel right to you, even if you like pretend that you know what you're doing, the horse knows. The horse is like, don't know what's happened to you today. So that's really important. And then the fifth one is, what do they do when what they're doing doesn't work? And that's that. If you put that through a critical sieve, that, makes a huge difference to what we're doing. You could put the, if you are in the US, TTouch.com has the book that Robyn was just asking that. If you're in Canada, you can get it from TTouch.ca, but if you're in the States, TTouch.com has the book. And I believe that the book comes also with your choice of a video on either the groundwork that we do or work under saddle. So that's where you could do that. So I forgot about the book. That's a terrible thing to say, but we have so many books, and we're just doing an online course on starting young horses too. I just did I just did the videos for the neckline driving and the and ground driving, so people can go through the steps of that. But it's what a process that is.
Yes, I do. I'm still working on it.
So anyway,
for the rest of my life.
Yeah. So cool. Well, it was so much fun to be here, Wendy.
Yeah, no, it's always a pleasure, Robyn. And you always remind me, like your little questions there, you always remind me of things that, I need to keep in perspective in my own daily life, because, you can get bogged down, not just with horses, but just with what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Trying to keep that, keep on the track and not take it to the barn when I go there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
That's always, of course, my guys are older, but it's being fair to them.
Oh yeah. Totally. Advocating for your animals, dogs, horses, it doesn't matter what it is. Advocate for yourself. That's the other thing.
Yeah. Can I advocate for myself with my cat who comes in and jumps over me and that's another story.
Actually, Robyn just said something about, you wish it would make it to the racetrack. Yes, interesting. Some of the exercises that we do, I've worked with racehorses that were, banned from tracks or whatever, like some of that couldn't go in starting gates and so on. All these exercises, as Wendy said in the beginning, this is like the ABCs of learning, and it doesn't matter what discipline you're going to do and so on. It's really, if you give them the foundation, this is about education versus training.
Yes.
And I see them as two quite different things. If you give them a basis of a good education, then whatever direction you take them, there's more choice, and they have the ability to learn. And that's the other thing. Teaching animals how to learn is really important. And so, and it's fun. You know what? Having a lot of choice, and it's not always easy because we have to take some responsibility. But I love it. I will always keep learning. And that was where, it was so much fun when we had time to spend together, when we traveled together before COVID. That was a great time, Wendy. So
we got to go back to Haltering. I dream about it.
I know. I don't plan on traveling very much anymore, but I do want to go back to New Zealand when I can. And I'll go back to Australia. There's a few places I'll go, but not many.
Okay. Let me know when you're going.
Okay, I will. All right. Hey, thanks, Wendy.
You're well. Great to see you, Robyn. Say hi.
Okay. I'll see you on Saturday. Okay.
Oh,
bye.
Yeah. Bye, everybody. See you next week.
Bye. Thank you for coming. Bye.
Bye.